Why being secretive is important, absolutely crucial when dealing with your family. Now, obviously, I'm talking about an unhealthy, dysfunctional, perhaps toxic or abusive family. In my case, it is emotional abuse, psychological abuse that has gone undetected under my radar without me being fully aware that I was actually being emotionally abused, that I was living with a narcissistic mother and a narcissistic sister. And so now that I am fully aware of this, even though I think I always saw signs, but I never deemed them as abusive or even jealousy looming around in this family, or just competitiveness, insecurities, personalities clashing, all of those things. They actually just accumulated to the abuse and the dysfunctionality that we have within my family, specifically between my mother and my sister and I. And so now that I'm aware and I'm fully aware and I acknowledge that there actually has been a lot of emotional abuse. And I think it's something that's really troubling that within, and I'm gonna speak about my own people within the Black community. I mean even excuse me. I mean, even taking it far beyond the Black community, there are just a lot of people who are actually not aware that you actually emotionally abused. Because with physical abuse, even though we hear stories of those people staying because they think somehow even the physical abuse, it is a form of love, but it is more direct. It is something that feels like more tangible, more direct, more blatant of an abuse, whereas with emotional and psychological abuse, it can be very subtle. It can take a very long time to detect it because you don't have a blue eye. Obviously, that is not to say that it's better to have a blue eye, but it's just harder to detect that you might be emotionally abused. And I have found that that was my case with my family. It took me forever to realize that that my family has actually been emotionally abusing me and that they have actually a narcissistic personality disorder. And now that I know all of this, I realize that I actually have to keep a lot of things a secret. I have to hide a lot of things about myself, what's happening in my life, or any accomplishments. I have to keep them to myself because even at a time where I wasn't fully aware that there was emotional abuse and dysfunctionality within my family, there was a time where I started thinking that there are certain things I don't want to share with my family because of the way they would make me feel. It was never a matter of them saying directly, maybe let me say I shared something with them. I'm a creative person, so maybe let's say I shared a creative piece of my work. They would never say, oh, that's ugly. We hate it. Like, why? That's a terrible job. And it frustrates me that they never really said that. Not that it would have made it any better or that it wouldn't have hurt, but I feel like I would have something more direct, more tangible, more blatant that I can point out, even if maybe I were to tell somebody that, hey, this is what has been happening within my family. It was more of how they would make me feel, more than what they would say. In some cases, it would be direct. It would be direct verbal abuse. But in most cases, it was actually very subtle. It was the way they would make me feel. And I started not wanting to share certain things that I do in my life with them because somehow I felt like they were not even really proud of me. I would share something that I'm so proud of to have done, and I would feel like I'm not getting that we are happy for you or proud of you moment that you would expect from your family. So much so that I started thinking that maybe I need too much attention or I need too much validation, which is actually part of the psychological and emotional abuse that you start blaming yourself. I started blaming myself thinking that okay, maybe I need too much attention. Maybe I need too much of validation. Maybe I am expecting a lot from my family. And once you get to that state, then you start to accept less than what you deserve because you think you want more. Of course, there are cases where you see people who just want way too much attention from other people and way too much validation from other people. There is such a thing as wanting too much from other people. And I've mentioned this in another episode that I am learning that I should be able to validate myself enough so that I'm not a burden to other people. But at the same time, I still believe that you need certain people around you to validate you to a certain extent, to a healthy extent, because you cannot always be able to 100% validate yourself and be there for yourself. So for me, it both of these things, they're very necessary. It's very necessary for me to learn to validate myself so that I'm not completely dependent on other people to do it for me. But at the same time, I also realize the value of the other side of having loved ones who can pick you up when you're not feeling so good, who can remind you how great you are, who can remind you of the great things you've done or how talented you are or how beautiful you are. We just sometimes need to be reminded that, hey, you're beautiful, and be reminded of the things we have done. I really believe that both of these are necessary to be able to validate yourself, but to a certain extent to be able to get validation from those you love. And that is something that my family failed to do, so much so that I started blaming myself, thinking that, okay, maybe I must want too much. Maybe I must want too much. And to a certain extent, I think that's true because my family, especially my mother, who was supposed to lead in terms of showing us how to be there for each other, I think because she didn't give that part of herself of like fully giving your child attention and affection and compassion and support, I think she left a void in us. And I even speak for my own narcissistic sister who has bullied me and bossed me around. But I think in both of us, she has left her an empty space where, because she didn't fill that space as a parent, now it's like we're trying other ways to fill them up, and unhealthy ways. Like I said in another episode, my way, an unhealthy way that I tried to fill that void that my mother should have filled by giving me attention, being affectionate and loving me. I tried to fill it by dating guys who were emotionally unavailable. And for my sister, I also see her in other ways that's also her way of filling that void. So my mother failed in that regard to actually be there for us emotionally. And so there came a time when I wasn't even fully aware of the emotional abuse going around, where I felt like I just didn't want to share certain things with my family, or where I just wanted to keep certain things to myself because I would come to them so happy and so proud of myself, when you want to share something that makes you happy. It might not even be a big achievement. It might just be a personal thing you did or something you're really proud of or something that happened at work or at school or wherever, and you want to share with your family and you're proud of it or you're excited about it. And I felt like my family would put a damper on my mood. I felt like instead of just being in this moment with me, of being excited with me or proud with me or joyous with me, I felt like they would, in a way, emotionally and psychologically, because again, it wasn't very direct, but I felt like I would just, when I have shared something that I'm excited about or proud of, instead of coming out from that conversation feeling more pumped because now my family is happy with me, I would actually come out feeling less excited than I was. And I think that's how I started noticing, like, the behavior that is not really normal, the feelings that I'm not really supposed to feel when I'm with my family or share certain things with my family, that I would actually start, instead of being as excited, then I would start not being as excited. And this actually resulted in me. I mentioned this in another episode that I actually really had a hard time being happy for myself, being proud of myself, being excited about that. It almost felt like every time I had like a good feeling, I would try to tame it. I would try to bring it down because it would be like, okay, don't be too happy because, maybe it's not going to work out, or don't be too happy because, you are not all of that. And now I realize that that actually comes from the mentality that we had within my family, whereby it felt like, don't be overly excited, you know? So when I shared something that I was happy of or proud of, there was this mood, this atmosphere, this vibe, this energy, and I don't even really believe in all that energy crap. But there was just this atmosphere that, like, don't be too excited. And it wasn't always directly said, but just when you share something good and something you're excited with, you're excited about with the people that you love, you expect a certain reaction, not just for them to say the right things as to say, oh, we're happy for you or congratulations, because they would say those things. And I felt like it was just, standard procedure, because we all know how we're supposed to react when somebody shares something that they're excited about or they're proud of. I felt like it was just standard procedure, but not necessarily being with me in that moment. And I think also vice versa. I think it is something that I've also maybe done to them, even though I've always been the sane one and the one who always tried to be supportive. But I think because this abnormality, this dysfunctionality and toxicity resided within my family, it obviously also rubbed off on me. So I do think that I'm also responsible at times of maybe not being as happy for my family as I should have been, because that was just the norm in this family, where it felt like if you were just really happy about something, it felt like people would try to tame you, to just hold you back so that, you're not fully happy or fully excited about something. And so I've started being very secretive with what is happening in my life. And even sometimes it's maybe not something that's really a success or an achievement or something really good happening in my life. But even certain things, there's just a lot of things that I no longer share with my family. I'm really hiding a lot of myself and a lot of things that go on in my life, because their reactions, their responses, they just always leave me feeling confused. They always leave me wondering how I'm now supposed to feel, because my family has really played a lot in terms of like how I feel. I think my emotions were determined by how my family is going to react. So if I shared something with them and it didn't seem like they were all that hyped up, and then I would also not be as excited. So I was really dependent on their validation. I was really dependent on them being happy for me. And if they were not, then that would also alter my mood. Then I would also not be happy for myself. But recently, since I'm currently unemployed, and I've been unemployed for a couple of years now, and excuse me, that was actually a sneeze. I tried to hold it back, but I couldn't. Excuse me. So there was a time where I almost got a job at a retail store, and I went to interviews. I went to two interviews and they actually went well. And honestly, for me, it wasn't a job that I wanted. But I think because I've been unemployed for a certain period of time now, I was almost willing to take anything. But it wasn't just the job that I thought I would have ever gone for. And not because I think it's beneath me, not because I undermine those who work in retail, just because it was never something I thought I would do. And that's just the honest truth, because I felt like God was doing me wrong, because I've worked so hard in all my life, and I felt like I just deserved better than that. Not I felt like God was being so unfair after all my hard work and just putting my head down. I thought I just deserved better. Maybe it was an entitled mentality, but either way. But the interviews went well. I had two interviews for that retail job, and then they needed references. And I had a hard time getting references. I was able to get one by the assistance of someone that I know. And then I needed another reference from my previous job. And it was just a back and forth of me emailing my previous workplace. And it took forever for them to get back to me with my reference letter. And I remember just trying to ask my mom, because I just felt like I needed that job so desperately. I was at a point where I was just like, maybe let me just fake a reference letter at this point, because my interviews had gone successfully. And the lady said, when they can just get the reference letters, I'm going to start working immediately. So I was just really desperate at that point. And I asked my mom rather, if like maybe at her workplace, isn't there somebody who could like maybe write me a letter? And obviously, it was a very far-fetched idea, and she didn't really say much. I think for me, more than anything, it was how she seemed not really willing to help me out. So in as much as I understand, because I don't even really seem to remember what she said, because I think I ended up dismissing it because I thought, okay, that's fraud, like getting to like the core of it. I just thought, like, you know what, this is actually fraud. I can't just simply get like a reference letter from somebody that I've never worked for. But I think at the core of it, even though I had asked my mom if she could get a reference letter for me from someone at her workplace, but I think at the same time, the underlying message there was that, hey, mom, I need help because I need a reference letter. And like the only thing that's left right now for me to get this job is just to get this reference letter. And my previous workplace is just not, getting back to me. And she didn't even try to like help me out with like suggestions or what we could do. And for me, that also just felt crazy. Like, hey, I'm in this moment where I'm just on the cusp of getting this job, and it seems like you don't care. But okay, like always, I dismissed that moment. And then finally, time started to run out. And then the lady got back to me and said, you know what? Like, even your application is about to expire. So if you're not going to get this reference letter, it means you're not going to get this job. And then eventually I just also gave up because my previous workplace was not getting back to me with my reference letter. And then I told her, I don't know if she asked or I told her, my mother, that is. Again, she seemed not to care that, I ended up not getting the job and I was so close to getting the job. It was just one thing missing. Again, she seemed not to care. And I was like, oh, okay. And my sister was busy saying, oh, like if they want so many things, yeah, like it's complicated to get that job. So yeah, whatever. Though those were not the reactions I was expecting from people that I love, because I was bummed to not have gotten the job, especially when it was so close for me to get the job, where it was just one thing missing for me to get the job and I didn't get it. And somehow their reaction was just like, my sister was more on the like dismissive side, where it's like, oh yeah, stuff them, they wanted too many things. Whereas they really didn't want too many things. Like they just wanted a reference letter. It's just a normal part and procedure of being employed. And then my mother just seemed like she didn't care. Like she didn't want to entertain this whole thing, which is crazy because I would expect her to not only be happy for me as a parent to be getting a job, but also to be happy that I will start to also financially contribute here at home. Okay, so that was that. And that was right before I was I was about to make the revelation that God was about to lead me in this process of discovering how narcissistic and emotional abusive they are. And then after that, I think that also just did hurt me that my family wasn't really there for me, during that time, which was just one of many times that they've actually not truly been there for me. Just that in other times, I never really took note of it. I never really took it to mind. But I think as I grew up, I started to notice these things that, you know what, my family is not actually there for me. Sometimes they're not really happy for me. Sometimes they're not really proud of me. I think with growth and maturity, I started to note these things more. And so after that, I just decided to myself, even with my creative work, because with my creative work, it's just like I freelance, I do it every now and again. Like me getting somebody who wants me to do something creative for them is very few and far in between. So it was never a really dependable source of income for me. But even with that, I started reserving it to myself because I used to do my creative stuff at church, and they had more access. My family just had more access to that because I was working with my sister in that team for doing like creative stuff for my church. And sometimes I would create something and show them. Again, there was just almost like this hint of them not knowing really how to respond, how to react. even though I had clearly done something well and it was very creative. But somehow, like my sister would even like sometimes she would see like maybe I had designed something. She would look at it and just like maybe head out of my room and then come back later and say, "Oh, that's great. Like you did a good job." Which was crazy to me. It was almost like she needed time to be able to compliment me, like she couldn't do it instantly. And I guess maybe she ended up forcing herself because she thought she would look bad if she didn't say anything. And that's just the kind of behavior that goes around in this family, whereby it seems like it doesn't come natural for them to compliment me. It doesn't come natural for them to validate me. So it's almost like they need time to do it. And when they do it, it's almost out of obligation that they know they're going to look bad if they don't say anything. And so even with my creative work, I started, hiding that from them and just not wanting to show them because of their reaction and their response, which I never understood. It left me confused and questioning my abilities, questioning my creativity, because I would be so proud of this piece of work and want to show it to my family. But their reaction, and then I would come back and I remember I would end up looking multiple times at something that I had designed or had done creatively because I wasn't sure, like, is it beautiful? I mean, when I did it and I just looked at it by myself, I thought it was great. But now that I had shown it to my family, I felt like, okay, maybe it's not that great. Again, it goes back to me saying that it felt like my family really dictated how I felt about myself. And I'm the one who's accountable for that. I'm the one who's responsible for that. I gave them too much power. I gave them too much power over how I should feel about myself and how they should make me feel. So my feelings were really dictated by how my family reacted or responded. So if it felt like they weren't really impressed, then I would also not be really impressed by myself. And then a couple of weeks ago, maybe 1 week ago, I got a phone call from this other company that I had been applying at for a number of times, even for different positions, because I just really wanted to work for that company because it's local. It means I wouldn't have to move. And then a week ago, somebody from that company calls me and they asked me a couple of questions, if I would be willing to work for a certain amount of salary, if I would be willing to work locally, just a couple of brief questions. And then that lady said, if I'm successful, I would have to start on the 15th of August. And today it is actually, as I'm recording this, it is the 7th of August. So a week has passed since that lady called me and I haven't gotten anything back. So I'm not sure if I'm successful, but I believe that if I was a successful candidate, they would have called me or they still gonna call me because there's still 1 week left before the 15th. So maybe in the starting week, they still gonna call me. But what I was thinking of is how I didn't tell my family that that lady had called, that there is a potential chance that I could get employed. And I'm just thinking that to myself because this weekend, yesterday was actually a Saturday, I was actually really bummed because the first week had passed without them, the company, getting back to me. And so I think I'm just starting to, to be scared a little bit that maybe they're not going to get back to me. But I'm still keeping the hope up because there's still 1 week left before the start of the program. So I'm thinking maybe they're still going to call me. But yesterday I was actually feeling down, just thinking, oh my goodness, am I not going to get this job too? I've been unemployed for such a long time and I need a reason to wake up. I need to do something. I need to feel like I have a purpose. And I was just really bummed out about that. And I had to go through all those emotions by myself. I had no one to talk to because I don't trust my family anymore with my feelings. So I didn't tell them that there's this potential chance of an employment, and I didn't tell them that I'm going through these emotions with it. And what actually came to my mind when I thought that if maybe this company doesn't get back to me and I don't get the job, what came to my mind was that at least I didn't tell my family. Do you know what that means? That means that I felt like, okay, at least I'm not going to be ashamed because if I had told them and then it didn't work out, somehow in my heart, I feel like maybe they would have been happy, or they would have been like, ha ha ha, you didn't get the job. Again, this is not something they would have done directly to my face, but it's something that I feel like sometimes happens in their heart. And for me, that felt so just not right, to think of my family in that regard, as if my family, they are my enemy, that I would think that I am glad that I didn't tell them, because it felt like, okay, if it doesn't work out, at least I'm not gonna be ashamed. And that's not how I'm supposed to feel towards my family. These are the people that you're supposed to trust, that, you know what, even if it doesn't work out, at least I still got people in my corner. People who are actually gonna comfort me and console me should it not work out. But instead of feeling like my family would be there, I'm actually glad that I hadn't told them of this opportunity, because I feel like, I don't know, somehow I feel like I'm then gonna look like a fool who didn't make it. I don't know, man. I don't know how to put it into words, because it's really hard to put this into words, because it's more of a feeling sometimes more than anything. Sometimes it's more than the words they say, it's the way they make me feel. And so here I am sitting and still waiting for that call and hoping to be employed. But I'm also thinking that if I don't get the employment, I'm glad I didn't tell my family, because I think somehow I would have been ashamed to have told them, and then it doesn't work out, because I think somehow in the deepest part of their hearts, I don't think they wish me well. I really, really don't. In as much as they do the right things or act accordingly when I tell them good news, but I'm really starting to believe that my family doesn't really wish me well, because of the way they make me feel. And I think the more reasons that I think I want to be more secretive with my life when it comes to my family is that I think a part of them always thinks that things work out for me, or that things easily come together for me. And I think this is because of certain things that have happened in my life, certain blessings, certain opportunities that have come along in my life. And maybe they look at that, they look at maybe the high points in my life, and they think, oh, things always work out for you, or things always come together for you. And that's not the truth. That's really just not the truth. That's just like looking at someone's Instagram page and seeing all the high points of their lives and saying, oh, like, oh, so and so's life always works out. They always get the job, or they always get the opportunity, or they always make money. And I feel like that's the perception that my family has about me, that things always work out for me, or things easily come together. And I think that's why they're not as visibly happy for me when something good happens for me, because it's almost like they think to themselves, oh, yeah, obviously things work out for you. And one thing that I've started really playing in my head is saying that you can't be mad about someone's blessings. There have been high points and things that have happened in my life that I also didn't expect. Like, even just me going to a multiracial school, I never thought that would happen to me. I went to three township schools, and then in grade 10, I went to a multiracial school, which was a very hard transition. And even as much as that was a blessing to be able to go to that school where they rarely took people from townships, but I was so there was so much going on during that time, because the transition was so hard. The environment, it was like a cultural shock. But because for them, they were just looking at the glittering side of things, that, oh, you're in this multiracial school, and my mom was paying my fees, but they weren't really putting much thought to how frustrated I was. I had to learn a whole new language, Afrikaans, from scratch, and it was really challenging. And it felt like everything was in Afrikaans for me. The environment was so different to what I was used to from my previous schools. But somehow it feels like they don't really take note of how challenging even the blessing comes with. Because certain opportunities are great and they are a blessing and you're like grateful, but they still have their own challenges. So, in as much as people can see you that, oh, you are blessed to have this opportunity, and you can also acknowledge that I'm blessed to be in this position, but that doesn't mean it doesn't come with its own challenges. And I think for me, that was one of the blessings and opportunities that I got from God that I'm grateful for. Looking back now, I'm grateful for that opportunity, but it was really the most trying time of my life. It was the hardest till the last day at that school. I was actually miserable. And I think God sustained me because I don't even know how I made it through in those 3 years. It was really, really hard. But obviously, someone will just choose to look at me going to a multiracial school and thinking, oh, that was such a fantastic experience. But it was just really hard. And so I think it's things like that and other high points in my life and other opportunities and other blessings, because they really were blessings. And I think my family looks at those things and thinks that, oh, things always work out for you. And so that's why maybe they just don't feel the need to express their their proudness or happiness for me or excitement for me, because they just have this mentality that things work out for me. And then they also make me feel like I'm showing off. This is why this is just another reason that I don't want to share anything with my family anymore. Somehow I am made to feel like when I'm sharing something that I'm excited about, I'm made to feel like I'm showing off. This is why I think I have learned, and now I'm unlearning, that I learned to tame myself, to tame how excited I am, because within my family it felt like I'm showing off. And this is really something that my mother, it's a mentality that my mother has, even with other people, that whenever people share good things and good news or whatever is happening in their lives, my mother takes it as to say someone was gloating or someone was just showing off. That's the mentality that she has. Like whenever people, it's the craziest thing. Whenever people tell my mother something good is happening in their life, she takes it as a way to compare like what's happening in her life and what's happening in this other person's life. And then she thinks that this person is just showing off instead of just like thinking that this person is sharing good news with them. And that's just how they've also made me feel, that whenever I share something good, to them it feels like I'm showing off. But to me, I'm just like, I'm sharing a good moment with my family. And in a healthy relationship, we should be able to be happy for each other. Just because I'm telling you something good that's happening in my life, for them to feel like that's me showing off, that is crazy. Again, this is not something they say directly. Luckily, I can actually deduce that this is how my mother thinks, because when she does speak of other people, she does directly say that they were showing off. But when it comes to me, she doesn't directly use those words. But when she talks of somebody, maybe a colleague or a friend who came to her and shared good news, she does explicitly say that they were just showing off, because in her mind it just doesn't seem possible for somebody to just genuinely share good news because they're excited, not because they're showing off. They're just genuinely happy about what's happening in their lives. But because she's so emotionally competitive and compares herself on a consistent basis, she thinks that this person is showing off. So that's the exact same mentality that she has towards me. That is the mentality that my sister also has towards me, that when I share something good, in their twisted minds, they think that you are showing off. They don't see that you are actually just trying to have a moment with loved ones where you are sharing something good that's happening in your life. And also, they don't really celebrate with me. Instead, they just go through the emotions. They go through the motions of being happy for someone. Like they just, like I said, it feels like standard procedure. This is how I'm supposed to act when somebody tells me good news, but it just doesn't feel like they genuinely with me in that moment. And so, like, even with me waiting for this call and hoping to get a job, I'm literally gonna share it when I have processed it. When I do get this job, I'm speaking it positively. When I do get this job, I'm actually gonna take time to celebrate by myself and be happy for myself, so that when I tell them, they don't put a damper on my mood. I'm gonna take time to fully process it and be happy for myself. and I'm no longer gonna allow them to dictate how I feel about something. I'm not gonna allow them to change my mood for me. And more than anything, I will continue to be secretive with my family up until the point where it's absolutely necessary for me to share something. For example, with me being employed, that if I do get the job, when I get the job, I will obviously have to tell them, because it means that there will be a day when I wake up and go to work, and I can't just look like I'm mysteriously just going somewhere now every day. But for the remainder of the time, I'm just going to keep secretive until it's absolutely necessary for me to tell them. And with other things, if it's not necessary for me to tell them, I'm not going to tell them. I'm going to be secretive with my family for my own emotional safety.